Chicago, a city built on steel, sweat, and secrets. From the gambling dens of the 19th century to the smoke-filled back rooms of the outfit, power in this town has never been accidental. Who were these men and women? Big Jim O'Leary, Dean O'Banion, Capone, Virginia Hill, Ricardo, Iupa, Cerrone. Were they criminals, businessmen, power brokers, patriots of their neighborhoods, or predators of their own city? For over a century, they shaped elections, controlled unions, built empires, and ordered executions, often in the same breath. Their influence reached beyond Chicago to New York City, to Kansas City, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles. But their roots were here. This is not a myth. This is not Hollywood. This is history. And I'm James on the Mob. Well, welcome back to James on the Mob, everybody. I'm James Jenkins, your host and narrator. In this episode, we take a hard look at Richard Cain, a Chicago police officer who moved comfortably between badge and mob, law and betrayal. Cain wasn't just crooked, he was calculated. And his story sits at the crossroads of power, fear, and double lives. For years, Cain walked untouched, a cop with connections, a fixer with a badge, a man who knew which lines could be crossed and which could be erased. But Chicago has a way of settling accounts. As alliances shifted and investigations closed in, Cain's world tightened. The same streets that once protected him now watched quietly as the walls began to crack around it. This is the story of a man who thought he could live between two worlds forever, and the price he paid for believing it. In the history of American crime, there are figures who operate in the light, and there are those who thrive in the absolute darkness. Then there was Richard Cain. To the public, he was a dashing, highly intelligent investigator, a man who spoke 5 languages and understood the most advanced technology of the era. To the Chicago outfit, he was a made member, a soldier who had successfully infiltrated the highest levels of law enforcement to serve as their eyes and ears inside the halls of power. The FBI would eventually describe him as possibly the most corrupt police official in the history of Chicago. Born on October 4th, 1931, Cain was a product of Chicago's ethnic friction. His father, John Cain, who worked in a steel mill, was Irish-American. His mother, Lydia Scalzetti, was of Italian blood. The marriage between husband and wife, already a stormy one, was laced with frequent, sometimes violent fights that became intolerable to them both. Finally, after 7 years of mutual agony, they separated and divorced 6 months later, in 1938. Lydia Cain did not want to look after her son, and in 1939, he was sent to live with his father's parents on their farm in Owasso, Michigan, a quaint little village near Flint. Cain attended St. Paul's Catholic School and only spent short periods of time with his mother in Chicago. And in Chicago, Richard learned about the streets and being streetwise. Lydia gave him neither love nor direction. He had no curfew and no restrictions of any kind. He learned to shoot pool, wield a knife, and fight as fiercely as someone twice his size. His mother Lydia was somehow friendly with the mobster Sam Giancana, and it was during his numerous stays in Chicago that Richard Cain got to know Giancana. In July 1947, when he was 16 years old, he got into trouble with the law. Cain decided to join the United States Army. After basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and training as a radioman at Fort Hood, Texas, Cain was sent to Japan. Later, he was posted to the Virgin Islands, where he worked as a supply clerk and a part-time military policeman, and also learned to speak Spanish. In January 1949, he married his first wife, who already had a child. Richard Cain was discharged from the Army on 23 June 1950. He took his family to Miami, where a Chicago friend introduced him to a private detective named John Waynes, who had been in Burma with the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, the precursor to the CIA, during the Second World War. Waynes had originally lived in Cuba and was a close friend of Fulgencio Batista, the former and future Cuban dictator who was living in exile in Fort Lauderdale. Batista was one of Wayne's most important clients. In 1952, Cain was sent into Cuba to monitor government activity for various clients in the Miami area. It was during this period Cain became an expert in installing wiretaps. In 1953, Cain and his family moved to Bay City, Michigan, where his father lived with his new family. Cain got a job as a bartender, but father and son argued continuously. 6 months later, Cain moved to Chicago, where he was employed as a security officer with the United Parcel Service. His work involved credit card fraud, burglaries, and hijackings. He made contact with old family friend Sam Giancana, and it was during this time he became drawn into the web of the Chicago mob. Cain participated in arranging numerous burglaries in UPS warehouses and hijacking of UPS trucks. Despite the criminal behavior, he was promoted to chief of security, and as long as he delivered by solving cases and no one was able to analyze the cases he didn't solve, he could pull it off. UPS became the proving ground for the Dick Cain style of police work. In 1955, Cain took a 6-week course at the Keeler Institute of Polygraph to learn how to operate a polygraph lie detector machine. Later that year, he applied to join the Chicago Police Department. Initially, he was rejected as being too short, at 5 feet 7 inches, with eyesight that tested out at 2200. However, it appears that Sam Giancana, with the help of First Ward politicians, arranged for the right people to be paid off, and Cain managed to grow a full inch and improve his eyesight to the required standard. He was accepted into the Chicago Police Department in May of 1956. Cain started off as a patrolman, but with the help of the hand of the outfit, he was promoted to the Detective Bureau. And it's rumored that Giancana matched his $9,000 a year city salary plus bonuses. Once he was assigned to the Detective Bureau, Cain was Giancana's bagman, the first week or so of each month, delivering envelopes up and down the chain of command. Captains and above would generally get a personal visit with a very subtle pass of the envelope. Patrolmen, sergeants, and lieutenants generally had to come and fetch their share, perhaps at a neighborhood bar. Cain developed a reputation as being a good cop when he was dealing with non-mob related activities. He often invited the press along on raids on brothels and gambling dens. This resulted in him getting his name and photograph in the newspaper. He also worked closely with Jack Mabley of the Chicago American, who was a crusading columnist who was investigating corruption. This included information that resulted in a crooked judge being sent to prison. Cain's partner in many of his most notorious exploits was Gerald Jerry Shallow. Shallow provided the tactical support and the appearance of standard police procedure that Cain's more elaborate schemes required. Together, the duo established themselves as a formidable force within the city's vice squad, specializing in high-profile raids that often yielded significant financial bonuses that never appeared on official police inventories. Their partnership was defined by a shared understanding that the badge was not a symbol of public service, but a tool for the extraction of wealth from the city's underworld. One such instance occurred in February 1959. Cain and Shallow arrested a 68-year-old prostitute named Grace Van Scoyek. They confiscated more than $100,000 in cash from the premises. Scoyek eventually got this money back, but she claimed that $60,000 had disappeared from her safe deposit box and that Cain had taken her key. Cain denied the charge, and he escaped prosecution for this offense. The predatory behavior displayed in the Van Scoyek case was not an anomaly, but part of a consistent pattern. In March 1959, just 1 month after the raid on Van Scoyek's home, Cain and Shallow were involved in a much more violent incident. They arrested 63-year-old Harry, Uncle Harry, Feigl at a bus station. The detectives arrested Feigl on suspicion of being a child molester. And during the arrest, Cain shot and killed Feigl, claiming the older man had pulled a gun on him. The circumstances of the Feigl shooting were highly suspicious. Attorneys for the Feigl family argued that the shooting was not a matter of self-defense, but an execution of a man who was deemed socially insignificant. Like the Van Scoyoc robbery, the Feigl incident showed Cain and Shallow targeting individuals on the margin of society, prostitutes and those in the gay underworld, knowing that their deaths or robberies would generate very little public sympathy and that their own versions of events would be protected by the blue wall of silence. This pattern of behavior suggests that Cain and Shallow were operating as a rogue unit within the police department, specializing in the exploitation of the unrespectable classes for both official merit and personal profit. In January 1960, Richard Cain and Jerry Shallow took a leave of absence from the Chicago Police Department and were recruited by the Illinois State's Attorney Benjamin Adamowski to spy on Irwin Cohn, who worked for Chicago's mayor, Richard J. Daley, as his Commissioner of Investigations. Cohn was paid a salary of $20,000 per year, plus an operating budget of $100,000. Adamowski was a Republican, and he feared Cohn was looking for examples of corruption against his fellow Republican Party members. Cain and Shallow were caught installing a camera aimed at the door to Cohn's office to photograph anyone who came and went. Following an investigation that lasted 4 months, Cain was forced to resign from the Chicago Police Department. And in a deal between the two partners, Shallow agreed to take the rap and admit to the activity. Remarkably, he managed to mend his relationship with the department and was later promoted to the rank of sergeant. In May 1960, Cain was appointed to assist in the investigation of police corruption in the city of Springfield, Missouri. His main role was to administer polygraph tests to members of the police department. His report to the city council resulted in the firing of 13 police officers, including the chief of police. On his return to Chicago, he established Accurate Laboratories. According to his business card, he specialized in investigations, guard services, undercover operatives, and polygraph examination. Unofficially, he also provided a wiretap service. In 1960, the CIA decided to work with the mafia in a plot to assassinate Cuban leader Fidel Castro. The advantage of employing the mafia for this work was that it provided the CIA with a credible cover story. The mafia was known to be angry with Castro for closing down their profitable brothels and casinos in Cuba. If the assassins were killed or captured, the media would accept that the mafia were working on their own. In the winter of 1959, however, the CIA still thought it could pull off the invasion of Cuba, but it thought the odds might be better if the plan went one step further: the murder of Fidel Castro. All the company needed was someone to do the dirty work for it. Professional Killers, a gangland-style hit. In August 1960, a CIA officer, Sheffield Edwards, contacted Robert Mayhew. Mayhew was a former FBI agent, CIA operative, and employee of the eccentric billionaire Howard Hughes. Mayhew also had mafia contacts. Mayhew offered the contract to kill Castro to Johnny Roselli, Chicago's Las Vegas overseer. He in turn arranged for a meeting on October 11th, 1960, between Mayhew and two leading mobsters, Tampa, Florida boss Santo Trafficante and Chicago boss Sam Giancana. Both were among the 10 most powerful mafia members in America. Mayhew told the mobsters that the CIA was willing to pay $150,000 to have Castro killed. On 12 March 1961, Robert Mayhew arranged for CIA operative Jim O'Connell to meet Roselli, Trafficante, and Giancana at the Fontainebleau Hotel. During the meeting, O'Connell gave poison pills and $10,000 to Roselli to be used against Fidel Castro, but Richard Cain to assassinate Castro. He was fluent in Spanish and had worked in Cuba in 1952. Cain saw it as a golden opportunity, as it had all the elements of an activity that could hold his interest. It was dangerous, it involved espionage, and it was potentially lucrative. While he had not succeeded in killing Castro, he had got as far as entering Castro's office, but was unable to find a way to use the botulin tablets. While leaving the grounds, his female colleague in the assassination attempt was captured. Cain claimed that she was later executed. In July 1961, after the aborted hit, Cain moved to Mexico City to set up a base of operations for an investigative agency. His first customer was the Sears Roebuck Company, who used his expertise in conducting investigations. During this period, he was in regular contact with Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard B. Ogilvie in Chicago. But soon, Cain was deported from Mexico. On his arrival in the United States, he made his way to Houston, where he found work administrating polygraph tests and training company personnel in the use of these machines. In September 1962, he returned to Chicago, and on his first day back in the city, he had lunch with Sam Giancana and dinner with Richard B. Ogilvie. Soon afterwards, Ogilvie was elected as Sheriff of Cook County. Sheriff Richard B. Ogilvie appointed Cain as head of the Special Investigations Unit, SIU. Cain was paid $5,000 a month, plus several times that amount by Sam Giancana. He arranged for bookmakers who were in competition with the mob in Chicago to be rated. He always checked in with Pat Marcy, an important political figure in the city and the Chicago outfit, before arresting bookmakers in case they were being protected by the mob. The Special Investigations Unit frequently targeted abortionists not so much as criminals, but as lucrative targets who would pay a lot of money in cash. This was never about upholding the law, it was all about the money, and the SIU became a crime wave of official larceny. In December 1963, thieves stole $250,000 worth of prescription drugs from the Zahn Drug Company in Melrose Park, Illinois. The following month, Richard Cain led a raid on the Caravella Motel in Melrose Park, where they recovered $42,000 worth of the missing drugs. The press were invited to attend the raid. One of the journalists made further investigations and discovered that the room, reportedly belonging to one of the thieves, had in fact been rented by Sergeant John Chaconis of the Special Investigations Unit, who reported directly to Cain. Daniel P. Ward, the Cook County State's attorney, discovered that just before the raid, Cain had contacted Zahn's Insurance and offered to sell them the drugs found at the Caravella Motel. Ward opened an investigation and subpoenaed grand jury testimony from all members of the SIU who participated in the raid. The grand jury was unable to determine who actually stole the drugs, but they were convinced that Richard Cain, John Chaconis, Bill Witzman, and James Donnelly were lying and had them indicted for perjury. In December 1964, the four men were convicted of this charge and were all dismissed from the SIU. In 1965, Cain's great protector, Sam Giancana, was brought before the grand jury. When he refused to answer the questions, he was jailed for contempt of court. He was released in May 1966, and the following month, Cain escorted him to Mexico City. Soon afterwards, the two men relocated to Cuernavaca. Cain would frequently travel back to Chicago to meet with Dominic Butch Blasi, who was looking after Giancana's business interests in the city. It was on one of these trips, in December 1967, Cain was arrested by FBI agent William F. Romer. Apparently, one Joseph De Argento, who had been convicted of the robbery of the Franklin Park Bank, had told the FBI that he was willing to give evidence against Cain and William Willie Potatoes Dodano. Cain claimed during the trial that his indictment had political overtones, and actually, he was right. At the time, his former boss, Richard B. Ogilvie, was trying to become governor of Illinois. Ogilvie's Democratic opponent ran full-page ads in the Chicago papers, linking him with the Cain case. On October 3, 1968, Cain was convicted of misprision, a failure to notify a law enforcement official that he had knowledge of a felony by others, also aiding and abetting criminals, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. He was sentenced to 2 concurrent 4-year terms and fined a total of $13,000. On July 8, 1969, Cain returned to court to face perjury charges in the Zahn Drug Company robbery in in Melrose Park. When he discovered that one of his co-defendants, Bill Witzman from the SIU days, was willing to provide evidence against him, he decided to plead guilty and was sentenced to an additional 6 months in prison. Richard Cain was released from prison on October 20th, 1971. He was nearly blind due to a degenerative eye disease. 2 days after arriving home, he contacted FBI agent William F. Romer and offered his services as an undercover agent for the FBI to help them cripple the mob. It was agreed to meet every Wednesday at Cain's apartment. After several months, the FBI decided that the information he was providing was of low quality, and he received his last payment in February of 1972. During 1972, after his parole had expired, he spent a great deal of time traveling between Chicago and Giancana's villa outside Cuernavaca. It has been speculated that Cain was involved in the smuggling of drugs, diamonds, and emeralds from Mexico at this time. Cain was also writing a screenplay treatment about the Bay of Pigs operation and was attempting to raise money to have it produced as a movie. He assisted Sam Giancana in opening a casino in Beirut, Lebanon. And the plan was to build casinos in Tehran, Iran, and Malta. In December 1972, he spent time with Giancana and singer Phyllis McGuire in Honolulu. In January 1973, he again contacted FBI agent William F. Romer and told him that he had fallen out with Giancana and wanted to make contact with the FBI in Mexico City. The Mexico City agent reported back to Romer that Cain wants to prepare reports of everything he knows about Giancana and his associates, and that he would be able to furnish sufficient information to get an indictment for Giancana within a year. In April, he was back in Chicago. While he was there, Mad Sam DeStefano was murdered. Rumors began to circulate that Cain had killed DeStefano. He returned to Mexico and seemed to have patched up things with Giancana. Also in 1973, Cain had regular meetings with outfit enforcer Marshal Caifano. Apparently, he was trying to persuade Caifano to support his plan to take control of gambling on the south side of Chicago. While in the city, he became aware that he was being followed. And on December 18th, he had a meeting with Thomas A. Farran, the former United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, and asked him if he knew anything about this. Farran told Cain that he was unaware of any pending arrest. The following day, he met with William F. Romer, who wanted information about the recent death of Fiore Fifi Buccieri. As a result of the conversation, Cain was paid $150 by Romer. A real busy bee he was, eh? By late 1973, Cain's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic and brazen. He was beginning to forget what mask to wear and when to wear it. He was telling anyone who would listen that he was the new leader Chicago needed. He was arguing violently with senior outfit figure Gus Alex over plans for 12-day gambling cruises off the Florida coast, a move that threatened the existing order. He was said to have bugged the bedroom of outfit capo Marshal Caifano, the very same man whose support that he sought out, and a man known for his hair-trigger temper. Richard Cain was a man who knew too much and was talking too loud. December 20th, 1973, 11:30 a.m. Richard Cain enters Rose's Sandwich Shop at 1117 West Grand Avenue. He's here to meet with 4 other men. They sit in the back, talking in hushed tones. At around 11:40, 2 of the men get up and leave through the back door. Cain is left at the table, talking to an unidentified woman in black. The door chimes. 2 men in ski masks enter. One is carrying a shotgun, the other a pistol. They each have a walkie-talkie clipped to their belts. The first gunman shouts out, "Up against the wall, all of yous." The 8 patrons and staff are lined up against the wall. The gunmen are methodical. One of them walks over to Cain and pulls him away from the wall and shouts out, "Who's got the package?" Cain doesn't answer. The gunman immediately shoves a 12-gauge shotgun under Cain's chin, pulls the trigger. The blast is deafening. As Cain falls to the floor, The second gunman fires another round into his head. The gunmen reach into Cain's pocket and remove a small mysterious item, the package. They run for the door. The woman in black follows them out. The assassination of Richard Cain was executed with the precision of a military operation. He was 42 years old. The package they took from his pocket has never been identified. Was it a list of names? A recording? Perhaps a key to a safe deposit box? It's another fact that has been lost to history. Whatever it was, the man who lived his life as a chameleon died as a target. A central enigma of the investigation was of the woman seen talking with Cain moments before the hit. Witnesses described her as an attractive brunette in her 30s, while some reports identified her as a woman wearing a blue robe or dress. Others described her in black. Criminologists and police investigators believed the woman was instrumental in setting up Cain for the killers. Most telling, witnesses reported that she exited the restaurant at the exact same time as the gunman, suggesting she was a coordinated part of the assassination team. Despite a task force being assigned to identify her, she was never apprehended nor publicly named. The primary suspects in the murder were identified by investigators as outfit capos Marshall Caifano and Joseph the Clown Lombardo, and possibly up-and-coming enforcer Harry Ailman. Caifano had been seen in Rose's sandwich shop only 2 hours before the murder, leading to speculation that he was conducting a final reconnaissance of the location. Multiple motives converged to make Cain a target. He had been acting as a high-level informant for FBI Special Agent William F. Romer Jr., the leader of the top hoodlum program. It was speculated that Caifano had discovered Cain's role as a double agent and received permission from boss Tony Accardo to carry out the hit. Shortly after the murder, reports surfaced that Cain, a master of electronic eavesdropping, had bugged Marshall Caifano's own bedroom. In the code of the outfit, this was an unpardonable sin of personal betrayal. Cain had recently been arguing violently with senior figure Gus Alex over the plan to organize high-roller gambling cruises off the Florida coast. And additionally, some believed, although highly doubtful, Sam was his own story, that the hit was a retaliation for the murder of Sam DiStefano earlier that year. At the time of his death, Cain was deeply involved in Sam Giancana's global rackets, including money skimming operations in casinos in Central America and Iran. He was also being investigated for a potential hotel casino front in Madrid, Spain, which federal authorities believed was a front for narcotics trafficking between Europe and New York. His disappearance from Chicago for periods in 1972, including a strange incident where a pilot identified him as a skyjacker who forced a flight to Honduras, signaled that Cain was operating on an increasingly volatile international stage prior to his return and subsequent assassination. Richard Cain's murder effectively silenced the man who had too many faces and knew too much about the intersection of the mafia, the FBI, and the CIA. So goes the story of Richard Cain. Cain lived in the space between power and secrecy. He navigated politics, intelligence, and the underworld, sometimes all at the same time. He wore the badge. He walked the corridors of influence. He met in diners, parking garages, and back rooms where power shifted quietly. But in the end, the shadows he worked in became the shadows that closed in around him. And like so many who try to balance between the law and those who defy it, Richard Cain discovered that the line between control and consequence was thinner than it appeared. Chicago remained. The streets moved on. But the story of Dick Cain remains a reminder that in a city built on power, secrets always collect interest. And in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on Richard Cain. I'm James Jenkins. If you've enjoyed this episode on the Man of Many Faces, you know what to do. Hit that up thumb to like, subscribe to the channel, and stand by for more James on the Mob. And before I check out today, I want to give a shout out to the channel's viewers from the UK and United Kingdom. Thanks so much for all your kind and inspiring comments, strong work. And for the rest of you slugs, remember, life is short, so don't whack it off. See yous.